She's using you. Maid's toddler yelled at Billionaire's fiancée at the altar. His reaction stunned everyone. I still can't believe this actually happened. A 3-year-old little girl, barely tall enough to reach the altar, stood up in the middle of a billionaire's wedding, in front of 400 guests, and said 3 words that stopped everything. 3 words that made the music stop. 3 words that made the groom freeze. 3 words that made the most powerful man in the room look at his bride differently. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And the little girl, she just stood there, with her tiny hands gripping the pew, tears running down her cheeks, like she knew something that no one else in that room was ready to hear. What she said next changed everything. Welcome back, beautiful people. If you are new here, you have just found your favorite place for stories that stay with you long after you finish watching. Before we begin today, tell me something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. I genuinely love knowing who is part of this community. Today's story is one of the most emotional, jaw-dropping, and deeply heartwarming stories I have ever shared on this channel. It involves a billionaire, a wedding, a secret, and a 3-year-old girl named Laura, whose tiny voice became the loudest thing in the room. Stay with me. You will not regret it. She was just the maid's little girl. Or so everyone thought. His name was Daniel Mercer, 31 years old, CEO of Mercer Global Technologies, one of the fastest-growing tech companies on the East Coast. Forbes had featured him twice. He had a penthouse in Manhattan, a vacation home in the Hamptons, and a net worth that made people nervous just standing near him. But if you asked the people who actually knew Daniel, really knew him, they would tell you one thing. He was lonely. Not the kind of lonely that looks sad from the outside. The kind that hides behind packed schedules and charity galas and perfectly tailored suits. The kind that smiles for cameras and then sits in silence in a $10,000 leather chair, staring at a city full of millions of people, and feeling completely invisible. His parents had passed when he was 24. A car accident on a rainy November night just outside of Boston. He had inherited the company, the money, the responsibility, and an emptiness that no amount of success had ever been able to fill. That was Daniel. Now let me tell you about Maria. Maria Delgado was 34 years old. She had worked as the head of household staff at the Mercer estate for 6 years. She was quiet, hard-working, deeply loyal, and carried a kind of dignity that you do not learn. You are born with it. She showed up every single day before sunrise. She kept the estate running like a heartbeat. Steady, quiet, invisible. And she had a daughter, Laura, 3 years old, curly brown hair. The biggest brown eyes you have ever seen in your life. The kind of child that makes strangers smile without even trying. Laura spent most of her days in the small staff quarters at the edge of the Mercer estate while her mother worked. She had a little basket of toys, a worn stuffed bunny she called Mr. Blue, and an imagination so wild it could fill every empty room in that mansion. But here is the thing about Laura. From the time she learned to walk, she followed Daniel everywhere. Not in a trained way. Not in a coached way. In that completely pure, unfiltered way that only very small children can love someone. She would toddle into whatever room Daniel was in, pull on the leg of his pants, look up at him with those enormous eyes, and say one word. Dan. Not Mr. Mercer. Not Sir. And Daniel, this serious, powerful, emotionally guarded man, melted every single time. His staff had quietly noticed over the years that the only moments Daniel ever truly laughed, really laughed, not the polished professional kind, were when Laura was in the room. She would drag him by one finger to show him a bug she found in the garden. She would fall asleep on his shoulder during evening staff meetings when Maria sometimes had no choice but to bring her along. She would hand him her stuffed bunny when she thought he looked sad. "Mr. Blue makes it better," she once told him, with complete 3-year-old authority. Daniel had kept Mr. Blue on his desk for a week after that. Maria had watched all of this with a careful heart. She was grateful, truly grateful that her daughter had found warmth and kindness in this man who so clearly needed to give it. But Maria was also a woman who understood boundaries. She knew her place. She knew the world they lived in. And she knew that Daniel Mercer's world and Laura's world were not supposed to touch the way they did. She had tried gently redirecting Laura many times. Laura ignored every single attempt. Because children do not understand walls. They only understand warmth. And Daniel Mercer was the warmest cold person Laura had ever found. Now here's my question for you right now. Have you ever seen a child love someone so freely and purely that it made even the adults around them stop and feel something? Tell me in the comments, because what is coming next in this story starts with exactly that kind of love. Then, 6 months before all of this, Celeste arrived. The moment Celeste walked through the front doors of the Mercer estate, something in the air changed. Maria felt it immediately. Laura felt it too. She just did not have the words yet. Her full name was Celeste Vaughn, 27 years old, stunning in the way that stops conversations. She had met Daniel at a philanthropic gala in the spring, seated at the same table, laughing at the same moment, reaching for the same glass of sparkling water by accident. It had been, by all outward appearances, a fairy tale beginning. Daniel had called her the next morning. Then the morning after that. Within 3 months, she was a permanent presence at the estate. Within 4 months, Daniel was talking about her differently. Not with his usual careful, measured language. He talked about Celeste with something that sounded like relief. Like he had finally found the answer to a question he had been asking for years. The staff watched. The staff always watches. And what they saw was complicated. Celeste was charming. Incredibly charming. She remembered names. She complimented the chef. She brought expensive chocolates for the household staff at Christmas, and smiled warmly at everyone she passed. On the surface, she was everything a woman in her position should be. But Maria noticed things. Small things. The kind of things that only someone who truly pays attention would ever catch. The way Celeste's smile reached her eyes when Daniel was looking, and disappeared the moment he turned away. The way she spoke about the estate not as a home but as a property, measuring square footage out loud, casually referencing renovation plans that Daniel had never mentioned. The way she asked Maria very specific questions about Daniel's finances, his legal arrangements, his family estate inheritance, in a tone that was too casual, too practiced, to be innocent curiosity. Maria said nothing. It was not her place. She was the help. But Laura noticed too. And Laura had no filter, no professional boundary, no social training that told her to stay quiet. From the very first week Celeste arrived, Laura watched her with those enormous brown eyes in a way that made Celeste visibly uncomfortable. Not a staring child the way some toddlers stare. Something more focused, more quiet. Like Laura was running calculations that her 3-year-old vocabulary had not yet figured out how to express. Celeste did not like Laura. She was careful about it. Careful in the way someone is careful when they know they are being watched. But she kept her distance. She never reached for Laura. Never crouched down to say hello. Never acknowledged her the way someone who genuinely loves children instinctively would. When Laura wandered into a room, Celeste would find a reason to leave it. And Daniel, blinded by something that felt like love, did not see it. He was so hungry for connection, So deeply, privately lonely beneath all that success. And Celeste had walked into that loneliness at precisely the right moment and filled it with attention and warmth and a kind of focused devotion that felt, to Daniel, like finally being seen. He proposed on a Tuesday evening in October. Private dinner on the rooftop terrace. Candles. A ring that had belonged to his mother. Celeste said yes before he finished the sentence. The wedding was planned for December. Fast, everyone whispered. Too fast. But Daniel had made up his mind, and Daniel Mercer, once his mind was made up, was a force that simply moved forward. Maria had been asked to coordinate the household preparations. She did so with her usual quiet professionalism. She pressed every napkin, arranged every flower delivery, organized the catering schedule, and on the evening before the wedding, when the estate was full of arriving guests and the sound of champagne glasses and laughter, Maria sat on the edge of Laura's little bed in the staff quarters and brushed her daughter's curly hair. Laura was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at her mother and said something that stopped Maria's hand mid-stroke. "Mama, Celeste doesn't love Dan," she told the phone. Maria froze. "What do you mean, baby?" Laura hugged Mr. Blue tightly. "I heard her. On the phone. She said she just needs a little more time. And then she said Dan doesn't have to know." Maria's heart hammered. "When did you hear this, Laura?" "Today. In the big garden. She didn't see me." Maria sat very still for a very long time. "Now let me ask you something. If you were Maria in that moment, what would you do? Would you say something? Would you stay silent?" Because what Maria decided that night set everything in motion for what happened the very next morning. Maria lay awake the entire night. By the time dawn came through the curtains of the staff quarters, she still had no answer. And the wedding was in 6 hours. She turned it over and over in her mind. What did she actually have? The words of a 3-year-old child who might have misheard. A child who might have misunderstood. Celeste was sophisticated, well-spoken, careful. Who was going to believe the housekeeper who came forward on the morning of the wedding because of something her toddler overheard in the garden? Maria knew exactly how that story would sound. She would be the jealous employee. The woman who didn't know her place. She would be dismissed before she could finish her sentence. And she would lose the job she had held for 6 years. The job that fed her daughter. The job that kept their small life together. And so Maria made the most painful decision of her life. She stayed silent. She dressed Laura in the small pale yellow dress she had bought 2 weeks ago. She brushed those curly brown braids. She tied white ribbons. And she took her daughter by the hand and walked toward the estate's grand chapel, where 400 guests were already filling the carved wooden pews. The Mercer Estate Chapel was breathtaking in December. Pine boughs along every pew. White roses cascading from the altar. Tall cathedral windows letting in cold silver morning light. String quartet playing something soft and classical near the entrance. Daniel stood at the altar. And when Maria saw him, her throat tightened. He looked beautiful. Not the way powerful men look beautiful at galas or in magazine photos. He looked open, younger somehow, hopeful in a way she had never once seen on his face in 6 years. He was standing tall in his dark suit, and he was smiling the kind of smile that lives just behind the eyes. The private kind. The kind a person only smiles when they believe they are finally about to receive something they have waited for their whole life. Maria found a seat near the back with the staff. She held Laura in her lap. And Laura, from the moment they sat down, had not taken her eyes off the altar. The ceremony began. The string quartet shifted to the bridal march. Every head in the chapel turned. And Celeste appeared at the entrance, breathtaking in white silk, a cathedral veil trailing behind her, a slow and perfect smile on her face. She walked down the aisle with complete composure. Daniel's eyes filled. The officiant began to speak, and Maria held Laura tighter, because she could feel her daughter's small body growing tense. The ceremony moved forward. The vows began, and then the officiant reached the moment. If anyone present knows of any reason these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now, or forever hold your peace. Silence. 2 seconds of it. And then, Laura wiggled out of Maria's arms with a force that only a determined 3-year-old possesses. Laura! Maria reached missed. Laura was already on her feet, already moving, those little patent leather shoes clicking on the stone floor. And before a single person in that chapel could process what was happening, Laura had walked all the way down the center aisle, pushed through the small wooden gate at the altar rail, and was standing directly between Daniel and Celeste. 400 people held their breath. Daniel looked down. Laura! His voice was confused. And Laura looked up at him with those enormous brown eyes, and she pointed her tiny finger directly at Celeste. She's using you, Dan. The chapel went absolutely silent. Not shocked silent. Not awkward silent. The kind of silent that falls when a room full of people suddenly realizes they are watching something completely real. Daniel's expression did not change immediately. He stared at Laura. He stared at this tiny person he had watched grow up on the edges of his world, this little girl who brought him Mr. Blue when he looked sad, who called him just Dan like he was a regular person and not a name on a building. And then he looked up at Celeste. Something shifted in his face. Celeste's composure, that perfect, practiced composure, fractured just slightly at the edges. Just enough. Just for 1 second. And Daniel saw it. Laura, he said very quietly, crouching down to her level. What did you hear, sweetheart? The entire chapel was leaning forward. And Laura, without a single moment of hesitation, repeated exactly what she had told her mother the night before. I want to stop right here and ask you something directly. What would you do if you were Daniel in that moment? If the person who just exposed your entire world was a 3-year-old child? Because what Daniel did next is the part of this story that I promise you will be thinking about for a very long time. What happened in the next 60 seconds inside that chapel will stay with everyone who witnessed it for the rest of their lives. Daniel was crouched at Laura's level. His hand rested gently on her small shoulder. Around them, 400 guests sat frozen. The officiant stood motionless. The string quartet had set down their instruments. And Celeste stood very still. Daniel rose slowly. He turned to face her fully. And in a voice that was quiet enough to be private but clear enough to fill every corner of that silent room, he said one thing. Tell me it isn't true, Celeste. Not accusing. Not screaming. Not the dramatic confrontation that movies train us to expect. Just a man asking a woman to tell him he was not wrong about her. Celeste's jaw tightened. Her eyes moved to Laura. Something cold passed across her face. Just briefly. Just for a fraction of a second. And then her expression reassembled itself, perfectly, like a mask snapping back into place. Daniel, she's 3 years old, Celeste said, in a voice smooth and practiced and completely controlled. This is absurd. She misheard something. She's a child. I know she's a child, Daniel said. That's why I'm listening to her. The room exhaled. Celeste took one step forward. Her tone shifted to something softer, more intimate. Daniel, please. Everyone is watching. Let's not do this right now. Then tell me it isn't true. The second time he asked it, it was barely above a whisper. And Celeste did not answer. Not immediately. And in that room full of silence, a pause of 2 seconds was enormous. 2 seconds became 3, became 4. And somewhere in those 4 seconds, Daniel Mercer's face changed in a way that no one who saw it would ever forget. The hope that had lived there all morning, quietly, slowly, left. He reached up and straightened his jacket. He looked at Celeste for a long moment. Something in his eyes was sad but not broken, decided but not cruel. "I think," he said softly, "that we should not do this today." The gasp that moved through that chapel was involuntary. 400 people breathing in at the same time. Celeste's composure finally cracked. "Are you serious? You are doing this because of a 3-year-old. Do you have any idea how this looks?" "I do," Daniel said simply. "I know exactly how this looks." He turned away from her then. Not dramatically. Not with anger. He simply turned around, and he looked at the little girl still standing at the altar between them, still holding Mr. Blue tight against her chest, eyes wide. And Daniel Mercer, billionaire CEO, a man who commanded boardrooms and moved markets, crouched back down to the floor in his wedding suit in front of 400 people, and opened his arms. Laura walked straight into them. He held her there, in front of everyone, for a long moment. And the people in that chapel later said they had never seen anything that looked more like a father holding his daughter than that moment. 3 days later, a private investigator Daniel had quietly retained confirmed what a 3-year-old girl had already figured out. Celeste Vaughn had been involved with a man named Marcus Reed for 2 years. Marcus was a real estate developer who had been systematically losing money for 18 months. The plan, pieced together through phone records and private messages, had been straightforward and cold. Celeste would marry Daniel. She would spend 12 to 18 months building legal access to joint assets. And then she would file for divorce and walk away with enough to save Marcus and build a new life entirely. She had not anticipated Laura. She had not seen the 3-year-old sitting quietly in the garden that afternoon. She had not understood that children who are loved notice everything. When Maria learned the full truth, she sat at the small table in the staff quarters and cried in a way she had not cried in years. Not from sadness, from the weight of relief, from the terrifying knowledge of how close it had all come to going differently, from the memory of her own silence the night before and the 3-year-old voice that had done what she could not bring herself to do. She pulled Laura into her lap. "Why did you do that, baby?" she whispered. "Weren't you scared?" Laura thought about it very seriously. "Dan looks happy when he's real," she said finally. She made him not real. Maria held her daughter and did not say another word. 3 months passed. And the story did not end the way anyone expected. The weeks after the wedding that wasn't were quiet at the Mercer estate. Quieter than usual. Daniel worked from home more. He took fewer calls. He sat in the garden some evenings and read, or appeared to read, because some evenings the book stayed closed in his lap and he just watched the light change over the property. Laura still found him every single day. She had no concept of the magnitude of what she had done. No understanding of the social earthquake her 3 small words had caused. She simply knew that Dan was still there, and so she still brought him things. A smooth stone from the garden. A drawing she made with red and yellow crayons. Mr. Blue on the evenings she thought he looked like he needed him. Maria watched from a careful distance. She had offered to resign the week after the wedding. She had written a formal letter, professional and gracious, and she had delivered it to Daniel personally. She told him she understood if her presence, or Laura's, made things complicated. She told him she was grateful for 6 years and that she wished him nothing but goodness going forward. Daniel had read the letter while she stood there. Then he had folded it very precisely, and handed it back to her. "Please don't," he said. That was all. 2 words. But the way he said them filled the space between them with everything that did not need to be spoken. Maria stayed. Spring came to the estate slowly that year. The garden came back to life in the way gardens always do, quietly and without announcement, until one morning everything is green and the air smells different and you realize winter has ended without asking your permission. It was a Saturday morning in April when Daniel came and found Maria in the garden, which was unusual. Normally she came to him or sent someone. He came to her. He sat down on the stone bench near the rose beds, which were just beginning to bud. "I owe you an apology," he said. Maria looked at him. "For what, Mr. Mercer?" "For not being the kind of person that made it easy for you to tell me the truth." He was quiet for a moment. "You knew. Or you suspected. I could tell in retrospect. And you couldn't say anything because I had made a world where the people who work for me don't feel like they can." Maria did not argue. She did not deny it. "I should have made this a different kind of place," he said quietly. "A long time ago." They sat in the garden without speaking for a while. And then Laura came running from the far side of the lawn, both arms full of dandelions she had collected with the focused energy of a 3-year-old on a mission. She ran directly to Daniel and dumped the entire armful into his lap. "For your desk," she announced. Daniel looked down at the pile of dandelions in his expensive suit. And he laughed. The real laugh. The one his staff had told each other was the truest version of him. "Thank you, Laura." "You're welcome, Dan," she said simply, and ran back to the lawn to collect more. Maria was watching her daughter. Daniel was watching Maria watch her daughter. "She told me something this morning," he said. "What did she say?" He smiled. "She told me that Mr. Blue wants to live at the big house permanently. That the staff room is getting too small for his feelings." Maria turned to look at him. His expression was open, unguarded, the way she had seen it once before, that morning at the altar before everything changed. But different now, steadier, more honest. "Maria," he said quietly, "I'd like to get to know you, not your title. If that's something you'd consider." Maria was quiet for a long time. She looked at her daughter in the sunlight. She thought about the 6 years she had spent quietly holding this estate together. She thought about the letter she had tried to give him. She thought about a 3-year-old girl who had walked to the altar of a billionaire's wedding and told the truth simply because she loved someone and could not stand watching them be fooled. "I think," she said finally, "that I would consider that." Daniel nodded, slowly, carefully, like a man who understood for the first time in his life that some things are worth being slow about. Laura came running back across the lawn with more dandelions. She stopped between them, looked at her mother, looked at Daniel, and smiled the smile of a 3-year-old who had absolutely no idea she had changed 3 lives completely, and also did not need to know. Some people spend a lifetime learning that love is honest and simple and brave. And some people learn it from a little girl named Laura, holding a stuffed bunny named Mr. Blue, standing at an altar where she had no business being, and telling the truth anyway. Here is what this story leaves me with every single time I think about it. We spend so much of our lives building walls. Professional walls. Social walls. The walls that say this is not my place and who am I to say something and they probably won't believe me anyway. We talk ourselves out of honesty because honesty has a cost. And then a 3-year-old walks past every single one of those walls, because she never learned they were there. The moral of this story is not that children are naive. It is that they are uncorrupted. Laura did not think about consequences. She did not calculate social risk. She did not measure her value against someone else's power. She loved Daniel. She knew something was wrong. And so she walked forward. That is not naivety. That is courage in its purest form. May we all learn just a little to love people the way Laura loved Daniel. Honestly. Without walls. Without waiting for permission. And may we all be brave enough, even once, to walk to the altar and say the thing that needs to be said. If this story moved you even a little, if it made you feel something real, please hit that like button right now. Not for me. For Laura. For every quiet truth teller who ever stood in a room full of adults and said the thing nobody else would say. Subscribe to this channel if you are new here, because every single week I bring you stories exactly like this one. Stories that stay. Stories that matter. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you felt when Laura walked to that altar. Tell me what you would have done. I read every single comment and I want to hear from you today. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about honesty and love and the courage of a little girl this week, please share this with them. You never know whose life a story like this might quietly change. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. This community means more than I can ever say. Take care of each other out there. And never stop telling the truth.